Imagine diving to explore an underwater cave, only to find yourself lost and trapped in the labyrinth of tunnels. Your oxygen levels are running out, and the one thought racing through your mind is this it? What would you do to escape the impending death sentence looming over your head? Would you instead try to make it quick? Would you choose a better way to embrace death? Cave diving can go so wrong, and this one was horrific. If you want to know how it happened, follow this video until the end. It's not for the faint-hearted, so viewer discretion is advised. Welcome to our channel, where we bring you real-life stories of unbelievable incidents. In this video, we're going to share unusual caving accidents that led to tragic outcomes that you wouldn't believe, caused by reckless decisions and the minutest of mistakes. Croatia, officially known as the Republic of Croatia, is a small, crescent-shaped country in Europe. This geographically diverse country is situated on the coast of the Adriatic Sea. It features low mountains and highlands near the Adriatic coastline, while flat plains hug the Hungarian border. It boasts of a multitude of islands. With its picturesque scenery and attractive infrastructure, more than 20 million tourists visit Croatia annually. It is a land where the warm Mediterranean blends with the freshness of mountains and the coolness of multiple islands. Amongst the many islands, Shilta is a remote yet ideal destination with breathtaking surroundings. Its total area comprises 58.98 kilometers. The island's economy is based on vineyards, fruits, olives, fishing, and tourism. Poganica Bay is one of the many bays located southwest of Shilta, and it accommodates a beautiful beach. As it's a bay, it can be reached by foot. It is a gravel beach surrounded by intact nature and aromatic herbs. But beneath this very bay lies the cave that forced its caver to choose an alternative to drowning. Can you guess what it is? The answer might shock you. 10th of September, 2002. It was 12:15 a.m. on Wednesday, September 11th, when the Croatian Police Department received an emergency call for help from a diving party member on a sailing boat, informing the police about a diver, namely M.K., who hadn't resurfaced since his dive had commenced about 3 hours earlier. The diver, known simply as M.K., was identified as a 31-year-old Czech Republican, and the site of the incident has been reported as the cave under Poganica Bay, which is situated on the southern end of Shilta Island. Earlier, the diver was on board with 3 other crew members, but only one was a diver. MK supposedly went diving at around 10:15 p.m. It's a supposition because the rest of the group went shallow diving somewhere in the near vicinity. When they returned at around 10:30 p.m., MK had already gone exploring the underwater cave. When there wasn't any sign of MK, 2 divers went looking for him. They dived at around 10:46 p.m., and they returned empty-handed at 11:41 after searching as much as possible. The victim had carried a 15-liter air-filled cylinder knotted at 200 pressure bars. By the time the searching party emerged, it was evident that the victim must have run out of air and drowned by then. That was when the call to the police was made. The next day, on the morning of September 11th, 2 police divers went searching for the body of the diver. One of them never returned. Another life had been lost in the search of a lifeless body. The police diver disappeared into the cave after releasing the buddy line. The other found his way out, almost depleted of his air resources, and suffered from a severe form of decompression sickness. The following morning, 2 bodies were retrieved from the cave. One was of the police diver who was found at 24 meters depth in the water at a multi-compartment shallow gallery of the cave. The other, the original diver, MK, was found at a water depth of 54.1 meters at the opposite end of the cave. The way that the victim was found opened new gateways of investigation, as what was deemed a case of drowning turned into a suspicious case of either a suicide or homicide underwater. The 31-year-old was discovered lying at the bottom of the cave, fully equipped on his back, with a diving knife protruding from his chest. His diving mask was not on his head, and his scuba regulator was out of his mouth. His life jacket was empty, and a low-power flashlight was found near his body. This was a strange and one-of-a-kind incident that was being witnessed and reported. So the big question was, investigations began, and all diving equipment, including the dive computers and gear, was collected from the crew for forensic investigation. Some strange reddish stains were found on the boat deck, which were taken as suspicious blood marks, and they were further moved for analysis, as well as blood samples being taken from the entire crew. The stains on the deck of the boat turned out to be paint. Several knives were found on the boat, which again were sent for analysis. All crew members consented and were sent for polygraph testing. A polygraph test is done by measuring and recording changes in blood pressure, pulse, respiratory action, and conductivity. At the same time, the subject answers a series of questions to prove whether or not a person has committed a crime. Before polygraph testing, the crew was not informed of the victim's body being recovered with a knife plunged into its heart. All the crew members cleared the test, except for the two who were with the victim when he went diving. They reacted to the words knife and blood, and they were taken into custody, but no formal charges were pressed due to lack of any evidence. Meanwhile, the scuba gear was being analyzed. The victim's knife and dive computer were recovered later. They were pulled out during the removal of the gear at the bottom of the cave during the recovery of the body and taking it to the surface. The testing proved that all diving equipment was in perfect working condition. The victim's air cylinder was empty when recovered. While testing its efficiency, it was pressurized to 200 bars and then checked after 24 hours, but no pressure drop was found. The regulator was tested for breathing comfort, and it was in order. The knife that belonged to the victim fit precisely into the sheath or holder that the victim had on when he was found dead. Thus, murder/homicide was ruled out after extensive probing of the whole scenario and evidence collected. After reconstructing the probable chain of events, the dive profile extracted from the dive computer, and the cave map, it all helped to conclude the final picture of what could have happened to the victim. Now, to understand it, we're going to have to look at the cave formation. The cave has a funnel-shaped entrance of around 2 meters in diameter, situated 9 meters below the surface. The entrance widens gradually, and after 15 meters reaches a collateral where the two galleries, the shallow and the deep, connect. The cave's interior is covered with ample amounts of the finest silt, the finest bits of sand. This, when disturbed due to any movement in the otherwise non-existent underwater current, reduces visibility to zero due to what's called Tyndall's phenomena. Even high-power flashlights don't work in such environments. The deepest floor of the shallow gallery lies 36 meters below the ocean's surface, while the deepest bottom part of the deep gallery lies at about 57 meters below the surface. The temperature ranged from 24 degrees Celsius at the surface to 14 degrees Celsius at the bottom of the cave. The connecting tunnels between the galleries can easily confuse the divers as to whether they've taken the right exit or the fake one. Once lost in the labyrinth of these funnels, and with low visibility levels, the diving expedition can become lethal. There is a fair reason why the native islanders avoid plunging down the Pogonizia Bay, whose very name suggests evil and pagan, a sign in and of itself. Reconstructing the chain of events, what actually happened. The victim, named MK, 31 years old, a cook by profession, was in immaculate health and in a stable mental state. He had basic dive training, but he was relatively inexperienced. During dinner, he had reportedly consumed alcohol, but not in excessive amounts. After the rest of the group had already gone diving, he decided to go to the cave for sightseeing at the last moment. The victim dived into the waters of Pogonizia Bay on Tuesday, September 10th at 9:15 p.m. After precise calculations were taken from the recovered gear, the air cylinder, and the footage of the dive computer, it was concluded that the maximum depth he achieved was 54.1 meters. His total ascent time, immediately before the vertical drop to the bottom, was 99 minutes. It was also concluded that the victim must have run out of air in the 44th minute of the dive, i.e. around 9:59 p.m., when he was actually at a depth of 36 meters. The cave map and dive computer footage helped reconstruct the scenario. The victim entered and reached a depth of 50 meters after a smooth, non-disturbed descent, which means that he descended directly to the deep bottom of the gallery pit. After that, he immediately started to ascend, but he missed the exit funnel and went into the shallow gallery. This could have happened because of any one of two reasons, either because of the low visibility due to Tyndall's phenomena, or he perceived the entrance to the shallow gallery to be that of the exit gallery, which is almost identical and can easily cause confusion. It's speculated that the police diver who lost his life the very next day also got confused for the very same reason and ended up drowning. He was also recovered with empty scuba cylinders, and the autopsy revealed undoubtedly drowning. The other police diver, who suffered from severe decompression sickness, stated the same reason that he got lost, because he misjudged the entrance to the shallow gallery to be the exit funnel. Fortunately, though, he found his way to the surface with almost depleted air resources. Well, the original victim tried to navigate to the exit point for at least 35 minutes before getting lost in the deep gallery. The flat line on the dive profile during the 55th and 60th minute suggests a period of rest under the roof of the deep gallery, where the victim possibly tried breathing from an air bubble trapped under the rocks. Put yourself in that scenario and imagine the victim's desperation, the exertion and non-stop struggle to find his way out, but you can't. What must he have been thinking? Trapped underwater with his breathing resources depleting by the second. He must have been weighing the pros and cons of dying by drowning or by stabbing himself in order to die faster. Imagine a situation where the only option you have is to choose the quickest way to end your life. Finally, he resorted to committing suicide and stabbing himself in the heart as he ran out of air in order to avoid the agony of drowning. The profile curve depression right before the vertical drop suggests that the victim lost activity and strength, possibly after he stabbed himself, ultimately losing consciousness and sinking to the bottom. It can be safely added that the increased levels of alcohol in the bloodstream must have contributed to the mental impairment of the victim, already affected by nitrogen narcosis at a depth of 35 meters, which possibly induced the decision to attempt suicide. Nitrogen narcosis is a reversible condition of altered consciousness that can occur when scuba divers breathe compressed air at a depth of 130 feet or lower. It is caused by the effects of dissolved nitrogen in the bloodstream, similar to that of drunkenness. Symptoms include confusion, difficulty making decisions, and cognitive impairment. The effects intensify at greater depths. A young man's well-developed and fully nourished body was recovered from the water 36 hours after he supposedly committed suicide. The victim was dressed in a wet dive suit. A minor defect was found on the wetsuit on the upper side of the left leg. A penetrating wound measuring 3 by 1 centimeters was found to the left of the median line, which coincides with the position of the defect on the wetsuit, indicating that the knife was stabbed through the suit. No other injuries were found on the victim's body, and no other defects were marked on the suit or gear. The wound was 11 centimeters deep, which corresponded to the victim's knife's length. The knife cut through the skin all the way to the upper segment of the left lung lobe, leaving a wound of 1.2 centimeters in diameter. The lower margin of the fourth rib was also injured. Some 300 milliliters of clear liquid and clotted blood were found in the left pleural space, indicating breathing problems in the last minutes and inhalation of water. These findings are typical of drowning. Conclusive findings state that the victim probably drowned within 2 minutes of being stabbed. Suicide during diving is quite an unusual incident and rarely reported. A few unpublished cases include a gunshot suicide and an elderly couple with a terminal illness who dived in and just kept heading down. It can be safely concluded, as per the investigative findings, that this was a case of suicide in desperation, where the victim found no escape. He was getting low on air, and he could read it through the pressure gauge. He was experiencing much trouble breathing under the rocks, and he couldn't find an exit point. He made this decision probably due to impaired mental ability due to nitrogen narcosis, and thus ended his life tragically. It is always advised that divers should have proper training before diving down underwater. They should be able to manage problem situations underwater and follow rescue protocols like free emergency ascent or buddy breathing. Diving down such a critical cave formation as Pogoniccia Bay, with its little experience as the victim had, and that too only for sightseeing purposes, was a disastrous decision from the start. It's easy to miss the entrance to Dulata Cave while driving down a small road in rural Bulgaria, but this unassuming hole in the ground opens into the longest cave in the country. One day, a group of 4 professional splunkers and 3 kids ventured into the cold, dark depths of the cave. In the dead of night, their trip turned into a nightmare, trapped below ground. What followed was the largest rescue in Bulgaria's history. This is the story of the Dulata Cave Rescue. Bulgaria is a small, lesser-known country on the western border of the Black Sea. On the opposite side of the country, the Vitosha mountain towers over the Bulgarian plains, with its highest point reaching an elevation of over 7,500 feet high. Vitosha is a great spot for winter sports like skiing, and hikers come here to marvel at the area's many wonders like the golden stone bridges, the icy Black Peak, and the mountain's tiered waterfalls. The mountain formed when faults in the planet's crust bent into one another, forcing huge sections of rock into the sky without disrupting the internal structure of the plates. Over time, glaciers carved a path through the nearby valleys, creating a vast network of tunnels that bore into the mighty stone of the mountain. Dulata is named for the sound of wind blowing through the entrance in the wintertime, and it's the longest cave in Bulgaria with a total length pushing past 11 miles underground. Dulata also snakes down 174 feet below ground. Formed by the Struma River, Dulata is a complex labyrinth extending across 6 different levels, with all the classic hallmarks of a world-class cave, including lakes and unique speleothems like the whale, the stonehead, the Synthrovo basement, and the underground lake of Ayazmoto. Dulata is also home to a variety of 22 different animal species like translucent snails, scorpions, worms, and 6 different species of cave bats. Cavers of almost any skill level can tackle Dulata, but you'll need to prove you've gone caving before to gain entry. There are easy passages that only take a few hours to explore, and there are more technical routes for experts. The longest route goes all the way from the first entrance ever found to the newest entrance. This route can take roughly 10 hours to complete, even for highly skilled, fast-moving cavers. In 2010, a team of 4 adult cavers gathered together to explore Dulata. Together, they had over 20 years of experience exploring caves and documenting their findings. The team also brought 3 less experienced cavers with them to show them the ropes. The 3 kids ranged from 11 to 14 years old. The kids had practiced climbing, and they wanted to challenge themselves by climbing the vertical sections of Dulata's cold stone maze. The team showed the mayor of Bosnik their credentials and received the key to open the cave's large metal gate. They began their journey at around 8 p.m. at night. The entrance to Dulata is a pothole that descends down right at ground level. The cave is situated directly off the side of a road, and for the uninitiated, it's easy to mistake Dulata as a storm or drainage gate. The experienced cavers guided the kids through the entrance to Dulata. This portion can be one of the most challenging parts of the trip for adults. This section is a narrow crawl that extends into some slanted portions that descend further underground. Some tours will tackle this section without ropes, which can be fine for areas with boulders, but portions with smooth stone can easily become slippery and difficult to manage. This portion continued until the cavers reached the first of 6 rivers intersecting the cave at this first level. Nearby resides a pathway that visitors often explore during cave tours. Across a narrow cliff high above a drop, the pathway leads to gorgeous rooms with unique formations. As they explored, bats flew overhead. Known nowadays as the carrier of the virus that wreaked havoc on humans in late 2019, bats are also the most common carrier of rabies in several countries around the world. Their thin teeth can make it hard for some people to even feel their bite. Exposed individuals may think the bat simply brushed against them or got too close with their spiked claws. Bites are even harder to notice with thick caving gear on. They took cover and waited for the creatures to pass by. The group ducked through more narrow crawlways and shuffled through thin gaps along the walls. They ventured deeper. As they passed more underground rivers, the adults began to notice the rivers were getting faster. Their flows spilled over their natural streams that had been carved into the rock over the centuries. They noted this down and kept exploring. Eventually, the waters were so forceful and vast that they couldn't safely pass through. Above ground, the unique geography of the mountain valley created a sudden storm that dumped huge amounts of rain. Prior to their entry, the night sky had shrouded the horizons in the coming storm. The cavers had no idea this dangerous flood was coming. The rivers and pathways that fed into Dulata were overflowing from the sudden deluge, and below ground, the team noticed that water levels were rising. As the storm raged on, the mayor realized the team was in dire straits and called for help. Emergency personnel contacted Bulgaria's civil defense teams and the Cave Rescue Bulgaria team, which has around 65 cavers and 5 medical staff. Once rescuers arrived, they were split into teams. The first team included a commander to oversee the operations from an above-ground camp. In the UK and other parts of Europe, these leaders are dubbed wardens or controllers, while in the US, these rescuers are called incident commanders. Wardens are assigned after emergency response has been reached, and they cooperate with police for the rest of the rescue. Once the warden arrives at the site, they will find the person who called for the rescue party to gather more details. The warden of the Dulata cave rescue was Atanas Russe. He quickly formed a search team to begin locating the trapped cavers. They faced hardships almost immediately. Since Dulata's entrance was at ground level and directly open to the sky, water was pouring into the entrance. Instead of lubricating the crawl space, making it easier to enter, the water dragged mud into the crevice, making it harder to pass through. Water levels pouring from the entrance made it difficult to breathe as teams pushed through. To aid the first team of rescuers, support staff used water pumps to limit the amount of water flowing into the cave. The shouts of workers rose above the rain as the pump's machinery hummed in the ears of the rescuers, making communication difficult, if not impossible. A communications team was already being developed. They would use a combination of tactics to ensure the underground teams could communicate with the surface, including hand signals between the cavers, handheld radios, and military field phones. Military field phones are often used for rescues. They're durable, easy to use, and easy to acquire. To use field phones, communications team members would bring spools of wire with them into the cave along with a field phone. This wire reached up to the communications control center at the rescue camp, and the switch box above ground could even connect to civilian phone lines and override their connections, giving them direct and uninterrupted access to emergency communications networks. Wireless devices, like cell phones, don't work well in these wilderness environments. Mountain trails, like those near the cave, don't get good reception. At best, they might get 3G speeds on a good day, but usually they get slower speeds if they get any reception at all. The mountains along either side of the valley could block reception from reaching the camp, and the storm also created interference. After learning the trap team had 4 expert cavers, rescuers felt confident that the team would be safe. Rescuers bet that the cavers would know to immediately seek higher ground to avoid the rising waters. They still worked quickly, but their misplaced confidence could easily backfire. They had no way of knowing the situation below ground. On the way down, the team could have passed dozens of subterranean rivers, and if any one of them was too strong, they'd be trapped, sandwiched with certain death on either side. Rescuers would search for the team along major routes inside the cave, including the beginner tour route along the cliff near the entrance. They would also look for bypasses to go around flooded areas to reach the cavers without risking their lives by traversing through raging rivers. If they found a good bypass, they could save hours of precious time and possibly even use that pathway to safely extract the cavers. Some members of the search team affixed ropes around stalagmites that were solidly anchored to the ground. That way, if ropes needed to be used, they could avoid drilling into the cave and damaging the natural structures. Up above, rescuers continued to arrive at the encampment. If anyone located the cavers, they would need a fresh team ready to depart at a moment's notice, but they still needed a round-the-clock search. To achieve their goals, the controller divided volunteer cavers into 2 additional groups so that search parties could work in shifts. Geological engineers assessed maps and the flow of the Struma River. They considered diverting the river or damming it to dramatically lower the water levels in the cave, but the task would be a huge undertaking, and the necessary equipment could take a long time to arrive. One of the rescuers brought up this possibility while rescuers were attempting to enter Dulata. Other teams agreed this could be a problem, so they called for bulldozers or excavators. At this time, even though Bulgaria's cave rescue team was a member of the European Speleological Federation, the Bulgarian government lacked an official connection with the caving groups. Russe, the warden, was overruled by the civil defense commanders, and his request for an excavator was denied. It took 3 tries as the veteran caver pleaded with officials before he got fed up and hired an excavator himself. In the middle of the night, the owner of the machine finally brought a backhoe to break open the resurgence. They brought the heavy machinery to the resurgent spring where the underground rivers exit the cave back above ground. Average excavators use hydraulics and heavy metal buckets capable of lifting around 4,200 pounds. But the largest machines used in mining operations can lift almost 10 times as much weight. The excavator they had on hand smashed through the tranquil springs that so many travelers had taken photos with during hikes. They removed the broken rubble to widen the mouth of the exit, allowing more water to pour from Dulata. Hopefully, this would decrease the overall water levels of the cave, buying the trapped cavers more time. If they were stuck between rivers, this maneuver could lower the underground rivers just enough for them to pass to higher ground. Investigations revealed that water levels were rising by almost an inch per minute, and the operation dragged on for hours. Eventually, over 24 hours had passed. As time went on, news began to carry all across the country. Soon, the head of the civil defense team traveled to Dulata to personally oversee the rescue effort. This event quickly became the largest rescue operation in Bulgaria's history. Shortly after being trapped for over a day underground, rescuers were able to locate the trapped speleologists. But they weren't out of danger just yet. Even though crews knew where they were, the raging flood made it impossible for rescuers to safely reach them. They estimated it would take at least another 16 hours to reach them. The trapped cavers huddled together for warmth, rationing their food supplies as the white noise of the water unceasingly poured into their ears. They bobbed in and out of consciousness as sleep deprivation gripped them. Their fear was ever present as they white-knuckled their own balled-up fists under blankets. They shook from both nervousness and the cold that was threatening to pull them into the eternal darkness of Dulata Cave. Above ground, news teams started criticizing the party for not researching the weather ahead of time. But as our stories have shown, even the most prepared cavers can find themselves in unexpected and deadly situations. After around 48 hours of rescue efforts, the cavers were brought out of Dulata, rattled but unharmed. If they hadn't been seasoned splunkers who knew the dangers of the underground world, they may have suffered life-threatening injuries or even died while trying to pass through the raging waters. In the years after the incident, Bulgarian politicians like Boyko Borisov campaigned on promises to protect caves and establish a unified mountain rescue service. But as of 2020, 10 years after the historic rescue of Dulata, rescuers still face an uphill battle with the Bulgarian government. The warden of the incident, Atanas Russe, said the operation was comparable to the world-famous Tam Luang cave rescue. If he didn't make the split-second decision to hire an excavator, it's likely all 7 cavers, adults and children, would have drowned in the waters below Dulata. Water levels rose by upwards of 50 feet over the course of the rescue. Even if they fled to higher levels, a second flood from above would have been the end of them all. Luckily, the cavers of Bulgaria banded together to save 7 lives from the raging floods below ground in Dulata Cave.